I forgot about this tonight, and Joy, I said, "My Joy, that you put these in here." So that's easy, right? So the devotional for tonight is called "Advancing the Cause," and I'm going to read Ephesians 3:8. To me, who am less than the least of all the saints. This must be the King James Mark, because the other Mark, because it reads like King James. To me, who am less than the least of all the saints, this grace was given, that I should preach among the Gentiles the unsearchable riches of Christ. The 34-year-old general was striking and handsome, with blue eyes and reddish hair. Major General George McClellan gave the impression of strength and vigor, and as one historian said, dashing about on a magnificent horse, he seemed omnipresent on the battlefield. He had a brilliant mind. And when Abraham Lincoln told him that the supreme command of the army was on his shoulders, he responded, "I can do it all." But he did very little, and for all his organization and personal charisma, he seemed unable to attack or advance his forces. Finally, Lincoln gave up on him, saying, "If General McClellan does not want to use the army, I would like to borrow it for a while." Many Christians are well equipped, well trained, well financed. No generations of believers has ever had more tools, more plans, more programs, or been more affluent. But are we really attacking the enemy and advancing the cause? Are we really winning our friends to Christ? Are we witnessing for Him? God has placed us where we are for a purpose. Use the tools and gifts God has given you to advance His cause. Out.
That's good.
all have to say I did a good job because Jackie's bribing you with ice cream. My hands are clean. So we're in 2 John tonight. 2 John, which kind of conveniently, it's the second shortest book in the Bible, makes it easier to remember. You'll have to figure out next week which one's the shortest. Just as John's Gospel and 1 John and 3 John, Revelation were all written in the 90s, so too we have 2 John, almost certainly written in the 90s AD. And similar problems that we're having. We see some more mention of Gnosticism, basically, creeping in. We have some of those same thoughts that we saw in 1 John, so, a very similar vein there. I tend to ramble, so, just throw something at me if you have a question. Let's begin looking at the first 3 verses of 2 John. John writes, "The elder to the elect lady and her children, whom I love in the truth, and not only I, but also all who know the truth, because of the truth that abides in us and will be with us forever. Grace, mercy, and peace will be with us from God the Father and from Jesus Christ, the Father's Son, in truth and love." John, he's was almost certainly an elder at Ephesus. Irenaeus, who knew Polycarp, who knew John, so all right, he mentions that he was an elder there in Ephesus. That's pretty close. Irenaeus, he lives in the 100s AD. John, is also probably of a mature age. I learned to say he's not of an old age. Well, he's mature. He's of a mature age. John is certainly familiar with his audience. He doesn't use his name, just as he doesn't use his name in the gospel account. Some have pondered, just as a quick side note, if John doesn't use his name in the gospel in order to not confuse himself with John the Baptizer. But John writes here to the chosen lady and her children. And there's kind of 2 ways we can look at that. Is he writing to a specific lady and her children, or is he writing to a church? It seems to me he's referring to a church, a body of Christians. 2 thoughts on this. One commentator noted that the word lady, Curia, is the feminine form of Lord, Kyrios. So there may be a hint of the church as the bride of Christ. But moreover, throughout 1 John, he said children like 13 times and referred to Christians. And so I think it makes sense here too that, all right, if he's speaking to children, he's probably speaking to a church of Christians. One of our main words we see in 2 John is truth. We'll see that word 5 times, and of course he wanted to impress that on the Christians in 1 John as well. He wanted them to stick with the truth, not go with the false teachers. Love and truth involves our hearts and our minds. We want both to be guided toward the truth. Because our hearts have turned to God, he chose us to be made like his Son. We see that elect word. Obviously, it's not that we're individually predestined. Some people get the idea of, Rudolph is predestined and Maximilian is predestined. No, God has predestined that this group of people who obey him will be saved. That's the thought of us being elect, us being predestined, if you will. Jesus, of course, is the truth. There in John 14, verse 6, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." He also said in John 17, verse 17, "Sanctify them in the truth. Your word is truth." And of course, there in John 1, who's the Word? Well, it's Jesus. Again, it seems to be John's emphasis. Are we going to stick with the truth, or are we going to go after the false teachers? The truth, Jesus, is mentioned. He'll be with us forever. I can't really call it a long time, but in our minds, we would say, boy, that sounds like a long time. We think of Methuselah. He lived the longest at 969 years there in Genesis 5, but that's just a drop in the bucket compared to eternity. Verse 3, we also have grace and mercy, two words that, I don't know, they sound similar, but there is a slight difference. Grace is getting what we don't deserve, forgiveness. Mercy is not getting what we do deserve, death. And he also mentions there in verse 3 this peace that we have, and that only comes through his grace and mercy. Made me think of Philippians 4, the peace of God which surpasses all understanding. And indeed, through all these struggles with the Gnostics, Jesus is the one still in charge. He's still the truth. He's the one to cling to. Obedient faith in Jesus' resurrection is where salvation is found. It's not in the secret teachings of the Gnostics. Any other thoughts with the first 3 verses there? I tend to just throw a whole bunch of stuff out there. So, verse 4 through 6, continuing here, says, I rejoiced greatly to find some of your children walking in the truth, just as we were commanded by the Father. And now I ask you, dear lady, not as though I am writing you a new commandment, but one you have had from the beginning, that we love one another. And this is love, that we walk according to his commandments. This is the commandment, just as you have heard from the beginning, so that you should walk in it. This thought of walking, makes us think of 1 John 1, verse 7, where we should walk in the light. John wisely tells his readers here, verse 4, what they're doing right, and then verse 5, what they could improve. It seems that Paul does that here and there as well. I think of specifically Philemon. Here's what you're doing right now. Let's make sure we do extra. Indeed, whenever we're talking with people, particularly non-believers, it's good to try and find common ground if we can. Someone said, what we live is what we believe. Everything else is just religious talk. If you believe your house is on fire, well, that's going to cause you to do something. You're not just going to, oh, well, that's fine. He mentions the truth once again. The truth is still the truth, whether it was 6,000 years ago or 5 minutes ago. The truth is still the truth, whether we're born in Muslim Pakistan or Christian Texas. 2 + 2 still equals 4. Jesus is still the truth, no matter where we happen to have been born. Even if the whole world were to be brainwashed, Jesus is still where the truth can be found. So we have this commandment, which is new, but it's also an old commandment, that we love one another. God had told Israel way back in the day, Leviticus 19, verse 18, you shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the sons of your own people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. Of course, where Jesus gets it in Matthew 22. But Jesus would also say, John 13, verse 34, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another. It sounds kind of odd. All right, love God, love your neighbor, okay. And then Jesus says, well, a new commandment, love one another. Well, I thought we had that one. So how is this new. How is it a new commandment? There in John 13, and like John mentions here. This guy commented that this new commandment is in regard to quality, not new in regard to time. Further, as Morris points out, the new thing appears to be the mutual affection that Christians have for one another on account of Christ's great love. In the Old Testament, all right, love God, love your neighbor, and they can sort of see it, but we get the full picture. We get to see what that love looked like in Jesus, and, well, okay, now it almost takes on a new commandment tone. Takes on a new meaning from Christ's example. Oh, Phil? Yeah. Very true, yeah. Yeah, it's not just the outward ritual, sacrifice the lamb. It's, well, where's your heart at? Do we have the spiritual aspect to it? Very true. Verse 6, if we don't obey God's commandments, can we say that we really love Him? Can we say that we really respected Him or believe in Him? Or, I suppose we could fill in that blank a few times. And indeed, while we do have things to obey, as it were, hey, at least we don't have to pilgrimage every year 3 times to Jerusalem. Deuteronomy 16, verse 16. Any other thoughts through verse 6 here? All right, verse, sorry. Yeah, good. Mm-hmm. Yeah, sounds, I guess my guess would be, they're still Christians, but are they erring a little bit, need to be back on the path? It's always kind of surprised me, the church at Corinth, they're still called Christians, but you read through the letter and it's like, oh man, these guys sound terrible. But, they're still called Christians. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, gotta walk in the light. Yeah, don't follow the false teachers. Was there another hand? I'm just seeing things. Yeah, he says that all the time. Just seeing things. Probably. All right, verse 7 through 11 here. For many deceivers have gone out into the world, those who do not confess the coming of Jesus Christ in the flesh. Such a one is the deceiver and the Antichrist. Watch yourselves, so that you may not lose what we have worked for, but may win a full reward. Everyone who goes on ahead and does not abide in the teaching of Christ does not have God. Whoever abides in the teaching has both the Father and the Son. If anyone comes to you and does not bring this teaching, do not receive him into your house, or give him any greeting. For whoever greets him takes part in his wicked works. Well, certainly if we can't believe that Jesus came in the flesh, something's wrong. Even the skeptics will get that far. But of course, this was the notion of the Gnostics. Say, oh, well, all flesh is evil and all spirit is good, so do whatever you want with your flesh, and that's okay. And Jesus must not have been flesh, because he was good. And that was their thinking, and of course, wrong. But indeed, if Jesus really didn't come in the flesh, well then what are we all doing here? What's the point of anything? Everything's meaningless if that's the case. That Jesus died, buried, and rose are, of course, fundamental to the gospel, as Paul laid out there, the first few verses in 1 Corinthians 15. And of course, Jesus had to live in order to die and be raised. We see again, or note again, just as we did in 1 John, that there are many antichrists, not just one. It's a term we only see in 2 John and 1 John. Those are the only two places. We never see it in Revelation, for example. Indeed, there are many, even today in the world, who are against Christ. At verse 8, well, we've come this far, let's not give up. We want that reward. Made me think of what Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 9, verse 24. He wrote there, "Do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one receives the prize? So run that you may obtain it." It can be easy for us to get complacent and say, "Oh, I've done enough," and "Oh, I've done this many things," or whatever. It can be easy to say, "Oh, well, somebody else will do it." And yet here we see elderly John keeping on. Again, verse 8, he mentions this full reward. I'm assuming pointing to eternity in heaven, our home with God, being with him forever. But even during our earthly stay as Christians, we're still blessed spiritually. There's also a scary note here in verse 8 and other places, of course, that it's possible to lose salvation. Don't lose what you have fought for, We think of Judas, we think of Ananias and Sapphira. They were once part of the saved. Verse 9, again, he's encouraging the Christians. We don't need the Gnostic secret knowledge. We have it all. I think of Jude, the faith which was once for all handed down to the saints. Well, all right, it's there in the first century, and it was once, and it was for all. So, we don't need any more. But don't the false teachers always say this? "Oh, you need our secret knowledge." Oh, yeah. We need to abide in the teachings that we have from the apostles. Couldn't help but think of my time back in Utah. Mormons are really nice folks, but they're not abiding in the teachings. Verse 10 and 11 here. If anyone comes to you and does not bring this teaching, do not receive him into your house or give him any greeting. For whoever greets him takes part in his wicked works. So, concerning not greeting someone, surely when the early church evangelists visited a city, they would often stay with someone from the church, a family from the church. John's emphasis here is, we don't want to appear to be supporting the false teachers. We don't want to be like, "Oh yeah, well, we're fine, they're fine, and all right, let's go with it." Certainly, there's nothing wrong if the Mormon knocks on your door and they want to come in, study. Well, all right, sure, try and have a study. It's not that I'm condoning their religion. We're trying to convert each other. Yep. Okay.
agency, but that's not their first cause. They're a denominational body, and that's their original cause. So if you, how do you apply that to this statement that he makes here? If you're helping them, are you with them?
I guess I don't see it that way. You know, we'll support various charities, and you know, we support the orphanage. Excuse me, the Against Abortion Clinic place, and you know, this type thing.
They're more of just a support. This the Salvation Army is actually a religious body. First and foremost.
Yeah.
I'm just curious how people would look at that.
Yeah, it is curious. Phil?
I look at it as though you're not there to support their religious body, you're there to support the homeless folks that they're feeding. You know,
Yeah, that's
every organization has something negative about it. It doesn't matter what you look at. So if we want to pick something apart, we can. Instead of, sometimes we need to learn to look at the good that they're doing in the community rather than try to figure out the negative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would go along that vein and say, well, you know, we gotta love our neighbor as ourselves, and you know, I'm not out heralding, you know, Presbyterianism or something. You know, I don't know.
Hey Mark, my dad had kind of an interesting dilemma one time. I was a real young preacher at the time, and pretty zealous and gung ho and just everything, you know. And he lived in a little West Texas town of Ozona, and he had a bunch of rental properties. And so a couple of Mormon missionaries came to town and wanted to rent one of his rooms or little houses or something like that, you know. And so he called me, and he just asked me, what do you think about it, you know? And we talked about this passage here. It says, if anyone comes to you and does not bring this teaching, well, obviously they've come to town with a whole nother teaching in their mind. But it says, don't receive them into your house and do not give them a greeting. And my dad was wanting to know, do you think I'm encouraging them by letting them stay in our rental house, and not for free, but of course they would pay for it and everything. So we talked about that for quite a while. That was many years ago, but this passage did come to our mind on that.
Yeah, my viewpoint, for what it's worth, is, you know, we're just loving our neighbor as ourselves. We can't shut off the whole world, as it were. You know.
He rented it to him.
That's what I would have done. Any other thoughts through verse 11 here? Yeah.
Verse 9, I think, is kind of a critical verse when we think about, I'm sure we've all heard the saying, you know, there's many paths to heaven. Muslims have their path, you know, Hindus have their path. But verse 9 contradicts that. It says, if you don't have Christ, you don't have God, period. You know, so that should kind of settle that argument if you accept the Bible. So.
Yeah, very similar to, the disciples. Oh, we saw this guy casting out demons. He wasn't one of us, but he was with Jesus. He must have been, otherwise he couldn't have cast out a demon. All right, finally, verse 12 and 13 here. Though I have much to write to you, I would rather not use paper and ink. Instead, I hope to come to you and talk face to face, so that our joy may be complete. The children of your elect sister greet you. And certainly there is something special about meeting face to face. And of course, we're not talking about FaceTime here. This guy mentioned there's a beautiful Greek idiom here in verse 12. Face to face is literally mouth to mouth. The intimacy of the desired meeting is evident.
There is something special about gathering together as a body and seeing each other face to face. Once again, here in verse 13, just like the beginning, the children of your elect sister, seems to me it must be another Church of Christ. This letter warns, but is motivated by love. Let's be sure to stand in the truth and follow God's commandments. I still got time. What's that about?
These last couple of verses seem to indicate that he has a specific congregation in mind. Since he's, he refers to children of your chosen sister, as though the congregation where he is, the people there, send greeting to whoever the church is. And since it's not just a generic letter, probably to everybody, even though it does apply, and we're studying it still today, but he did seem to have a particular congregation in mind. That seems to answer maybe Phil's question earlier. What verse was it, Phil, where it was about
4.
verse 4? I was glad to find some of your children walking in truth. It may have been he just ran into some people from that congregation, and he knew they were from that congregation, and they were walking in truth. And it might be, if I was talking to somebody in Laramie, and I said I ran into some of your members, they're living over here and they're really doing good. I just wanted you to know that they're sticking with it. It may not be as theological of a question as just a simple, I ran into somebody that you guys know. I just want you to know they're doing good. I started to say that a while ago, but I wasn't sure whether it was just from one congregation to another congregation, but at the end of the letter it seems to kind of indicate that.
And actually, he had raised his hand, but he never raised.
Any other thoughts before we close? Yep. In my mind, no. And my thinking is we're just loving our neighbor as ourselves. I think the main emphasis is we don't want to be condoning their false teachings. We don't want to be evangelizing for them. If we want to love our neighbor as ourselves, I don't see a problem with that. Yeah.
I wonder if it's not similar to our tax dollars go toward abortion. Does that mean we all not going to pay taxes? We got to pay our taxes.
I don't think it's similar to that at all. If
Mhm.
you're supporting an organization that is a religious organization, like Jerry said, the Salvation Army, they are a religious organization pushing their false teaching. So why would you be involved with that, no matter what it is? God is not going to get glory from false teaching.
This is true, yeah. And I wonder kind of where the line is on, well, is it charity, and hopefully my money's going toward feeding the guy, and their money's going toward the guy.
Yeah, no, no.
Well, there's like
That's not gonna happen.
there's like the toy drive that the Salvation Army does. There's like the food pantry that the Catholic Church does. I mean, are we really being cautioned not to, I really wanna know.
I'm very cautious about it. Debbie, you know, we're a pretty giving bunch around here. We're giving all the time, and I know where our stuff is going. I know where our money's going, and there's no question in my mind whether some of it's going to teach someone false doctrine and some of it's going to help benevolent cases. I don't have any question about what we do. And it's really hard, especially with a thing like the Salvation Army. It's pushed so heavily around. What time of year is it? Thanksgiving, Christmas time, I guess it is. And they're just everywhere. They're on TV. They're on football games. You know, they have big. It's all geared toward helping the Salvation Army and stuff. And so you feel like Ebenezer Scrooge or something whenever you say, well, I don't know if I want to give toward that, but we don't give to everything. You can't give to everything, so you have to discriminate in some way as to who you give to and who you don't give to, and that's totally your choice. You have to decide that yourself, and I have to decide it for myself. But I am discriminating, I guess. I'm discriminating as to what I give to and what I don't give to.
I think if you look at what's written about benevolence and giving, you have to put the perspective in. The fact of the matter is, there was only one religious body when these words were written. But now how many are there? And 2 John, verse 11 says the same thing every time you read it. If you're going to help someone, everything that was done benevolently in the first century was done by the churches, or in the name of the churches, not in any name of any denomination, because there wasn't any at that time. But now, what's to say? There's just because somebody's doing a good deed, what does the Bible say about that? Matthew chapter 24 and 25. They're coming saying, Lord, look what we did. What does he say to them?
Never knew you.
Yeah, never knew you. So if we're going to help someone do something, we should be helping our congregation do something. That's really what the Bible is telling us to do. As brothers and sisters, we should be doing our own benevolent work and our own giving and promoting. And we used to do that when we were in Maury Avenue down there, because we cooked a meal once a month, or maybe it was once a week, I don't remember, and took it over to the Camille shelter and they ate it there. But to me, if you're helping someone else, you're supporting them in what they're doing. Just my take on it.
I suppose one other thought. So let's say we don't give any money to these various places like Salvation Army, but we can still invite somebody in for a Bible study. Yes, let's not at least confuse that much. Yep. Well, I don't know nothing else, so.
Hey, Mark, didn't you mention earlier, Mark 9? I thought you were mentioning that earlier, where Jesus told him not to stop those that are casting out demons in his name. So I think it is confusing that he kind of tells us both things at once. For us to decide, we have to be able to discern what's amongst ourselves, like like Mike was saying, it's difficult sometimes to know the answer to that. Those guys were doing things in Jesus' name, and he said not to stop them, but because he said if they're not against us, they're for us. So I think that's one way. There's kind of different ways to look at that. And I think for Debbie it's hard to know what's okay and what's not okay. It's difficult. I think you have to decide, like Mike said, for yourself, how do you feel about that? Do you feel okay with that, or do you feel like it's violating something, like you feel like you're supporting them in some way to further their teaching that's false teaching? So I think you have to look at each situation differently and then study about it until you feel like you know what is right for you, so that you know what's going to feel right for you, because you're going to get a lot of different opinions in here about how to approach that. Everybody's read the different scriptures and studied them, and so they're going to know different ways of looking at it. And like Phil always says, it's the attitude that you're using to look at it.
Ron?
I'm gonna say too that there are some big Church of Christ organizations that you can look at if you're, looking to donate for a hurricane or a flood or something. They're a big Christian or Church of Christ.
Yeah, no lack of opportunity.
Well, you gave me homework because I didn't even know what the Salvation Army teaches. I really didn't. I didn't know they were a religious group.
Absolutely.
I thought they just helped the needy and food.
They
No,
are,
they're
but they
religious.
also are, there's a case management program that's not part of the religious organization.
But
And
there's,
they pay for testing and
didn't know
things like that.
Well, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mark.